All right, hello everyone. My name's Sam. First of all, I want to say sorry it took me a while to make this video. I had a couple of things going on during the holiday season. This was the tumbler cup that I had made a few months ago. That was tie-dye. I used acrylic paint. In the comment section, I'm gonna show you a picture of all the paints that I used along with the brushes. I just take a little dollar store paint and squeeze out the colors that I'm going to use for this cup. I decided to go with the brighter shades today. I know I did a pastel one a few weeks back as well, but it's really fun just to use some bright colors, and they remind me of Lisa Frank. I'm sure there's other 90s and 80s girls out there who recognize that color scheme. So today I'm going to do a 12 ounce little cup here. I was gonna go with a bigger cup, but my spray paint was not behaving this morning whatsoever. So here I have two brushes. Unfortunately, the first time I didn't clean it well enough. I do recommend that you use a square cup. Here, let me see if I could. This is just a little square paintbrush. I really like using those edges. But today I'm going to use this one since it's a little softer. It has a slight angle to it, and since it's a smaller cup, I don't mind using something that makes littler strokes. Okay. I also like to keep a little cup of water to the side. I do tend to go from one color to the next with just wiping instead of rinsing. I know that sounds silly, but I kind of like how it drags the other colors into each other. It kind of helps it blend better. Okay, had to do a little cutscene there. All right, so you guys know I tend to do my cups non-calculated. With that being said, don't get me wrong, if you need to make a line and use a ruler and you want it to be precise, we got to do what we got to do. But when it comes to fun cups like this, I try not to think about it too much. I just go with the flow. Everyone, as we know, won't come out the same, but it'll definitely make something pretty. So first I do start by I'm going to start with pink today. So I'm going to take a dab of the pink and just make little outline of where I'd like my spiral to start for the tie-dye. So I'm going to go right to the center, my eyeball version of the center. Just far out mark everything. Just a little sketchy. And one of the most important things when I'm painting these strokes, if you can see, I apologize if this is too far away. It's my first time making one of these videos. I just put a little bit of light pressure on the brush, okay? And then as I sweep, I start to lift up. So that creates that little flare at the end, and that, I believe, really lets everything tie in nicely and blend together instead of looking strategic or like a perfect line. I mean, unless you're going for that look, go for it by all means, but that's just my little recommendation if you want it to be blended, you know, better. All right. So you know, some of these neon colors tend to appear very light when you first apply them to the cup, and you might see here that some of my pink strokes really do have some transparency to them. Now, when I finish the cup, or even when I'm in between colors, I will show you guys how I go back in, or I go over it, or I just want to like blend a section better. Eventually you're going to create layers and they're going to build upon each other, so don't be too concerned about that from the get-go. When I first started making these cups, I used to really be concerned and how the strokes were coming out right from the beginning. kind of just learn to have fun with it and work with it as I go. I know we tend to be perfectionists, but it'll come out pretty. Now, you can see that I did one layout of a spiral, okay, going from the center out. Now I'm going to start to create the larger area of the burst and just do a little outline on the back side. Now, unless you want to put a burst in the front and the back, that's an idea too, but I like to stick to the single burst on the front, of course, unless the customer requested something else. So on the back side of that cup, this is the front spiral, you could see where the burst is exploding further out. Now what you're going to do is just create another section of that pink that kind of just almost are like rays coming off of the sun. Remember when we were kids and we drew those little circles with the little lines for the sun? That's what this reminds me of, actually. Kind of just brings back some memories. So on the bottom, I try the best I can to continue off of the bursts that meet the edge of the cup. Now the bottom doesn't have to be so precise. You can just kind of go with the flow and come off the bursts. You will see how as you're going along, you'll kind of just figure out with the bottom. Okay, now that we kind of have that connect the dots system laid out on our cup, I'm going to go right into applying the pink and filling these spaces. Now, I try not to get too much paint on the brush because I don't want it to like glob on, and you might see some of these spots where I did that a little bit. Those will kind of flatten out along the way, but I try to avoid it the best I can. Now, let's see here. I'm going to get a little tighter on this burst actually. Just to, there we go. All right. So, apologize for the background. I do have a hobby room where I do all my tumblers, but funny enough, when I do these cups, I'm typically sitting around in our living room watching an episode of Gilmore Girls or Friends or Virgin Lake or whatnot. Just makes the time go by quicker. And you know, I find with cups like this, if you just kind of don't get too zoned in on the painting portion of getting every swipe to look alike, tend to come out better than you'd think. So when I see these thick clumps I have going on over here, I sometimes just go up over them quickly while the paint is still wet, just to drag them out a little bit. And so instead of having to apply a lot more paint onto my brush, I'm able to just kind of steal some from these spots that hold a little bit more than I'd like. And you could see here, let me bring this close to the camera, we're already starting to get that burst effect. Again, light pressure up, light pressure swipe, light pressure swipe. Another thing I recommend is, and I see myself guilty of it right now, is when you're doing these strokes, especially in the beginning, it's very easy to get carried away. You start to get into it, and that's great. But what happens is then we leave a little bit of room then for our next colors. You know, the first color really paves the way. I mean, it depends. If you really want this cup to be predominantly pink, that definitely would be pretty. But I'm looking for more of a rainbow effect here with my neon. So I'm going to try to cool it off a little bit and make these strokes a little smaller. So you know my paints are good old Hobby Lobby, 89-cent, $1.39 acrylic paints, and you know, they work just as well. Now I'll get a little bit more into this at the end, but when I'm done with the cup, I like to seal it with the clear glaze. I know a lot of people use Rust-Oleum and other glaze, Mod Podge glazes, things of that nature. Any of them will really do, just to hold everything in place when you put that first initial layer of epoxy on. I want to know any tips you guys might have too. Now, has anyone here tried to do an alcohol ink tumbler with tie-dye? I'm really tempted to try it, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little intimidated. I don't have the markers, and I was thinking about trying it with the actual ink and a paintbrush. I don't know if that would make it too transparent, but let me know if you guys have any tips on that, because definitely want to learn how to do tie-dye, more techniques. I was even thinking of, for Valentine's Day, making one with the heart starburst center. Thought it might look cool, but for the first video I made ever, by the way, wanted to do the one that I promised you guys. Just good old tie-dye. Now, so you know, when I get to the edges, especially in the beginning, the top of the cup, the bottom of the cup, the corner, what you can do is just slowly make the strokes smaller and smaller going up to the edge of that cup. Same with the bottom. We're not going to get too fixated on that right now, because we're going to focus on just laying out our map here of tie-dye. All right, so getting to our second color almost, just doing a few more swipes here of the pink, and then I'll just transition us into the orange. So you know, like I discussed before, this is going to be one of those times where I don't wet my paintbrush. I'm just going to gently wipe off the excess pink paint onto a paper towel here and go from there. I really like how it blends the colors. Again, I'm kind of just having fun on the bottom. A little party on the bottom here. Nothing too cohesive, just some fun bursts. It'll really surprise you that you could have fun on the bottom and just kind of go to town a little bit. Not too crazy, but you'll still get a nice end result. And you know what? I have to say, I do think that customers appreciate when you go the extra mile on the bottom, and whether it's with glitter or with alcohol inks or, you know, anything like that. So I think when they look at the bottom, they're not really looking for it to be perfect, but it's just like, oh my goodness, it's also there too when I lift up the cup, you know. All right. I'm gonna go into my orange. This is where it's a little tricky, I'm not gonna lie, right in the burst. So I try the best I can to keep the strokes there very tiny, okay? When it comes to the end and I'm putting in my final touches, that's when I really exacerbate the center more and put more color into it, whether I'm dragging one color into the next or I'm just adding some more pinks or oranges. Really just kind of brings the burst to life, and it's easier to be able to determine how you want that burst to end up looking when you've already applied a lot of the paint to the cup, because as you know, as we're going back and forth between colors, you know, you're dragging other colors into each other. So when I go into the second color, I'm going to get a little closer to the camera. When I go into that second color, I am not as tight with my strokes, meaning they're not as close together. I spread them out a little more, make them a little more sparse, because, you know, as you know, it's a lot harder to take away than it is to add. So if you really go a little heavier with like the pinks or whatever color you choose to do first, when you go back in, I recommend that you leave that space between colors. And I apologize if you're having a hard time seeing the transition here. I'm working with a new tripod circular light thing going on. Okay. Something else that really creates that tie-dye illusion is overlapping with the previous color. Now, I'm not going heavily into the pinks, but when I see a little space or area that's a little sparse, I go in there with that second color and that orange, and I just drag it along, because not only is that filling some of those open spaces we talked about before that might be there, those little white see-through spots, it's also making it blend together nicely. Okay, and see those little circular chunks? I'm not going to worry about too much of those little air bubbles. Another thing I really like to do with tie-dye tumblers, and honestly it's the only way I've ever made them so far, is adding some cheat glitter to the epoxy. Not a lot to take away from, you know, the design we make, but just that little added sparkle. It hides those imperfections nicely too. Okay, so this is that tricky spot when you come until the top of the cup or the bottom. So I'm just going to slip in here, do a few swipes. There we go. Okay. Whenever I make one of these cups, it puts me in the mood to start making tie-dye clothing. But I know that we already have an expensive hobby making tumblers and adding clothing to that list. I don't know, guys. Do any of you also make any clothing with your Cricut or tie-dye, shirts, sweatpants? I don't know. There's a lot of options out there. Okay, so I'm not very happy with the way this end is coming out. It kind of looks too streaky. But we'll get back to that later when we're touching everything up and we're adding another color. Okay. Whoa. There I go. I tend to be really heavy-handed. Okay. Let's go to that bottom again. Just add a little bit of bursts. A little bit of sunshine. Okay, so the next color we're going to get into, to be honest with you, I just find it to be a pain. But I feel like our little rainbow here wouldn't be complete without our yellow. It is very light when you start to apply it to the tumblers. I like to just do it a little slightly thicker, but again, I do prefer just to go back to avoid looking clumpy. And I also like to overlap it with the orange. Oh my goodness, it's almost see-through probably on the camera. I do apologize. Probably hear my doggy in the background too. Luna, She's drinking and eating lunch. All right. So I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm not a big fan of this yellow. If anyone has any recommendations on a yellow paint that they like, please do share. Have to experiment a little bit more with this color still. Okay. Alrighty, so let's go to that center burst again. This one I'm really gonna be not so generous with the yellow paint. I just want little hints of it since it is so light. Here we go. Once I get all this yellow on here, I'm going to bring it up to the camera to show you guys how it kind of also brings the pink and the orange together when you put this yellow on. So even though it may not be so pronounced, it's serving a purpose. Brightening things up a little bit. All right. So has anyone on our group done a craft show since COVID has hit? Now, I'm all about social distancing and quarantining and following guidelines, but I know that in the summer and springtime they had held a lot of local craft shows, street fairs, and social distancing practice. But as far as attending to sell cups, anyone have any tips? Do you put up a sign that says please don't touch or something like that? I know as all of us shoppers are guilty of picking up and not only seeing with our eyes but our hands stuff we're gonna buy. And with COVID, it kind of concerns me because I'm like, well, I don't necessarily want multiple people handling the same cup, but then I also don't want to be spraying them down with any kind of cleaner in between. Maybe a polite no touch sign? I don't know. What do you guys think? Okay, so I'm gonna bring this close up. You could see that yellow is really bringing the pink and the orange together nicely. It really helps us transition to the green. Even though it may not be perfect, it serves its purpose. And you can see the bottom of the cup. It's going to look a lot prettier at the end. Promise that. Okay. Let's go into our green. Again, very light strokes in the center burst. All right. I apologize for all the noise in the background. I don't know if, I'm sure many of you live in the Northeast and experience that really fun snowstorm we had this week. A lot of our postal services, deliveries, garbage trucks, they're really going overtime to get stuff done they couldn't in the beginning of the week, and you may hear some trucks in the background. Okay. It's always fun when you do a cup like this to really see it come together along the way. Again, as I'm adding layers, I tend to make the burst rays further out from each other, just to kind of get an idea how the colors are blending before I go crazy adding a lot. Ooh, that's a little thicker than we want that to be. Just work some of this off. Work some of this out. Okay. I really like to credit my patients with my profession when it comes to cups like this. I'm actually a dental hygienist, and I found it very funny how I feel like a lot of the cups I make, what really helps is the fact that I'm so used to working with tiny instruments all day and cleaning people's teeth. Kind of goes hand in hand. Just like when you're a dentist or a painter, you know, you find ways to really steady your hand and that muscle memory. Okay. Are any of you ladies in a profession that you feel in some strange way really helps you with your cups or your crafts? Tell me about them. I'm interested to know, because I'm sure a lot of you notice. All right, so when we get to the point where these two bursts start to kiss, what I do instead of going in this motion, okay, circular, I go back and forth, and I'm going to show you the best I can close up. Okay, so I'm at that center point. I'm just going to kind of go back and forth, not with too many, because I still want to incorporate my purple and blues, which I will, but a little bit of that back and forth motion just brings them together nicely. Instead of just having the two bursts meet and maybe not blending as nicely, I really just like going back and forth when it comes to the spot again where they're whoop, kissing. Same thing on the bottom. It's at that point where they're starting to kiss. So I'm just dragging them into one another. I'm eventually just gonna connect the dots. Okay. Really get that green off. See if I could do it without wetting the brush. If you do have to wet the brush in between, by all means, I do just a little dab of water like that. Work it out on the paper towel, and it's usually ready to go. After that, it's not soaking wet or extremely saturated, just slightly damp. it's really interesting to see how this cup is coming out compared to my first bright tie-dye cup. I want to say maybe that one was a little more of beginner's luck. I will say that was my first one ever that I had shared with you guys on my initial tie-dye post. So that was the first tie-dye cup I ever made. So I'm not taking credit by any means for anyone else's work or tutorial I've watched, but I will say this: I watched a lot of YouTube videos on making tie-dye cups, not just one or two on acrylic paints, but a couple as well on other techniques like the alcohol ink markers, things like that. This was just kind of like, in my mind, a collaboration of all those videos that I watched in one way or another. As you guys know, as we watch tutorial videos, it's kind of like you pick up a little bit from each video you watch. I mean, unless you have like a goal to make a specific cup, you tend to just kind of go with the flow and get ideas along the way from other, we'll call them artists. Okay? All right. See how I could squeeze in this blue. So this is one of those points where we have to start really overlapping our color schemes. So I'm gonna start on this part of the burst, the bottom, just gently tickling in some blue. Really overlapping with those greens and yellows. It makes the blue a little more neon. I chose the flatter blue. Didn't want to go with a neon, only because I will say this: if you choose to do a cup like this, and on my palette, I know you see I have a lot of neons like the orange, the green, the yellow, the pink. I would suggest that you do add flatter colors to that combination because of how thin the neons tend to be. Now, I can't speak for every paint brand, or if you have one that you find that really goes on, you know, pronounced, by all means use it. But if you're using like, I don't want to say cheaper end, but okay, I'm gonna call it what it is. I prefer to go with something that's a little cheaper but good quality when it comes to my acrylics. I don't use them that often, you know, and it's still, we do get a pretty result with these colors. Okay, this is starting to really look like a rainbow. Again, pressure, lift, pressure, lift. Really just like, sometimes you have to stop for a second and remind yourself of that. Really, you know, when you get carried away and you're just kind of rolling with it, sometimes you get a little heavy-handed. Okay. Wowie. I will say too, ladies, once you seal this cup and you put it under epoxy, the difference that really shows through and how the colors pop and the tie-dye bursts and everything, it just really comes together. It really just doesn't give it justice to see it just painted. Because I'm new to this and this is my first time making a video, I do apologize. I am not going to record applying the epoxy, but I can provide you again with just photos of the tie-dye ones I've done in the past and what they look like with the epoxy over it. It just doesn't do it justice. Okay, and again on that back at the bottom, I'm going to really start to go back and forth with that paintbrush, bringing it all together. Okay, I'm gonna leave some room for our purple there, but it will definitely come together. Okay. When you're using a brush that has an angle to it, especially like I am this time, you gotta watch when you do this back and forth motion, because you can't just go sweep back and forth like a broom. Because of that angle, it'll take away from that little tail, fish tail we'll call it at the end. Okay, might have went a little too heavy there, but that's okay, it still looks good. Okay, all right, look at that. It's really looking pretty. Okay, I'm gonna wait until I complete the purple color before I show you guys the bottom again, just because I'm redoing it a little bit, kind of working with it as I go. Like I said, I wasn't really feeling the way it was coming together on the bottom. I know that's not our focal point, but I do want that bottom to still look nice, of course, not just a blob of colors going on. All right, now I'm just gonna use a little bit of water. We're gonna get going into that purple. Okay. By the way, when I do this, I'm not painting myself. I'm just seeing that the brush is dry enough and not too soft and wet, because you know acrylic paints will react with water. All right, it's gonna go into our purples. Gonna burst out a little bit more with this purple because I do have a wider white space there. Okay. I'm gonna leave a little more space in the center burst. I'm gonna go back over with the pink and orange. I just think it looks so nice when you have a pink or orange center burst. Sorry guys, I just need to turn this cup towards myself a little bit more. A little bit more right now so I could kind of see where I'm at. I feel like my spiral got a little wonky. I'm choosing to go a little heavier on the purple just to fill in some of these spaces. You don't have to do that when it comes to the last color. Like I said, we're going to go back anyway, but just a choice. Spur of the moment kind of decision. And if your spiral starts going a little flat, I want to say, kind of around here, instead of looking like that nice circular ray. What I'm doing right now, and I apologize, it's just I'm having a little difficulty holding in this position as I'm trying to correct it. What I'm doing is going a little further down here on my spiral, just ever so slightly, and plus I'm going to add more pink, just to create again more of that circular spiral instead of that flatness I have a little bit going on there. Okay, that's a little better. It's going to get better. So you guys know, I believe I got this 12-ounce kitty sippy cup from Craft Haven. I typically use stainless steel depot, but lately I've been ordering from Craft Haven. Apologize, I don't recall if this one's from Craft Haven or stainless steel depot, but it's, again, it's a 12-ounce kids cup. It does have a traditional lid though. It's not a sippy lid. I was going to use a 20-ounce stubby, but my spray paint was not behaving today. I am in Pennsylvania and I don't unfortunately have a large space or a heated area outside that I could go into to spray paint. So we did convert a space in our basement with like a spray paint tent, air filter, things like that, to do our paints in the winter time. But this week with this snow, oh my goodness, every time we try to spray, my husband and I try to spray paint this week with our, you know, own hobbies, it just came out like cottage cheese, let me tell you. You all have been there, I know it. Okay. All right. Into our final strokes here. Okay, look at that. See what I was talking about? Those colors are blended so nicely on the back side where the bursts are meeting that it looks cohesive. It doesn't look like it just ends or stops. It really is coming together. So I'm going to decide to go back in with some more pink. I really like this pink. It just reminds me of a sunset when you see the orange, the yellow, and the neon pink going together. It just really brings me back to the summer. I think we're all looking forward to the summer. So I'm just adding in some of that pink, meeting to where the purple lies, so it's all blended in. I'm gonna wait until the absolute very few last strokes until I decide what my burst is gonna really focus on as far as colors go. I really like to drag the center burst out pretty far. Not a lot of streaks, but just like 4 or 5 just really longer strokes to emphasize the center. But right now I'm just going back into those thinner areas and I'm dragging through that pink, and that pink is being dragged through even to the blue. It's just a light stroke. I wouldn't even say that like I did for the previous strokes that I said, you know, pressure and then swipe, kind of like a fishtail. I'm just swiping, just gently swiping, not a lot of pressure at all, just focusing on adding to that little layer of color to those transparent areas. I like to do this with the lighter color. You could do this with the orange as well. I would say the yellow might be a little too see-through, but by doing this, it's just adding more dimension. Okay, you could really see that. And it kind of makes the purple look neon too. Even though the purple isn't, and it's not necessarily a bright color that I had picked, by dragging that pink a little bit on top of it, you know, maybe with some orange I'll do after too, it just really brings it to life. Okay. Now, keep in mind, if you do not like the chunky look of the paint and thicker spots in different areas and you like a more cohesive look, I do recommend just putting a very, very light, thin dab of the paint onto your brush. I personally like that little chunky look. It does fade away as you add the layers, and you use that paint to drag it throughout the cup, not in just one swipe. I go for that look. If you don't, I would just play around with it. You know, grab a little cup. That's another thing I recommend, guys. So when I did my first cup, I used a straight stubby 20 ounce. I know I've said that so many times, but the reason I emphasize that is, as you can see, this cup has a slight, it's not a straight tumbler. Okay, I feel like when you start doing this for the first time, if you have a straight tumbler, it's a little easier. Like if you're using a curved tumbler, I've done a curved one before, you have to really watch your bursts, which, you know, excuse me, where you're centering it, how you're going around the cup, and it's not going to meet as evenly as it does with a straight cup. So I would just grab like even a little stubby 20 ounce or a skinny 15 ounce, just something smaller, and really just go to town with it and play around, you know. Okay. I also would like to know, this is another question I have for you guys, okay? Feel free to share. Has anyone done a cup tie-dye with glitter? I think I might have seen one or two posted on this page, but I don't know if anyone has any advice on that as well. I really think that would be a fun project, but I'm sure it takes a lot of patience. Instead of just adding the cheek glitter, I think that's going to be one of my next ventures that I try out with tumblers, is making a tie-dye glitter one. But I don't want to just dive into it. So you let me know if you have a good tutorial or something that helped you make one, or have a picture of it. I'd love to see it. All right, coming to the bitter end. One of the best parts about this cup is if you get to a point where you're like, okay, I need to fill this in with some more colors, I would say that you could take almost any color that you have on your palette and just slip it in. Like, for example, you see the space right here? I'm going to play around with that spot today. Typically, I would just go a little heavier on the purple or add some pink, but I'm going to see if I could go into like a green or something fun. Something that obviously won't look strange or doesn't blend well, but I'm going to see if I could go from like purple, blue to green again. Okay. If you're looking for more of a distressed look, I would say that leaving some areas white would definitely accomplish that look if you're going for it. I know a lot of people use the alcohol ink markers and then do a spritz of alcohol or two, and it really looks nice. Okay, guys, I'm gonna add a little more pink to the bottom, and then I'm gonna go back to that one spot we have on the back again, just to spruce it up. So my bottom is definitely very funky. I'm going to come up close so you guys could see it. I went a little non-traditional with my tie-dye spirals. Look at that. Okay. I'll also post a picture in the comment sections. I do think with the bright light, I'm having a little bit of a washout look on my cup. So we're going to go back, do a little dab of water. I'm going to make sure this is dry enough. I'm going to go for some green. Let's go for some green, bring the spot to life. Okay, it's pretty cool. All right, that's different. Just a little flare of funk. All right. All right, guys. Well, again, thank you so much for asking me to do this tutorial. Again, I do apologize that it took me a while because of, you know, some things going on in life. We're all good. If you have any questions for me or have any recommendations, or even if something that you would have liked to see done differently or think might work better, by all means, do feel free to just send me a message or comment below so we all can look at it and just give each other some ideas on how to make this a little better. If you'd like. Or if you like what you see, let me know. I'm really thinking about making a tie-dye burst. Start with a heart burst and then flare out. Let me know what you think of that, because especially with Valentine's Day around the corner, I'm really tempted to try something different and just maybe throw some hearts out there. Oh, for lastly, I do want to go back to, for a moment, to our center burst and do a drag out of a color. So the reason I wait until the end is because since every one comes out so differently, I try to take a look at it once it's done to see what color really jumps out to me from that burst. For my original cup, I believe I really expanded upon, I think it was the blue or the pink, I don't recall. I am going to take a look at this and say I feel like it's predominantly blues and purples in here. If I go in with a yellow or even a green and I start dragging out a burst really long, I can guarantee you it's almost going to look brown. I don't want it to look brown. None of us do. So I am going to probably take, I'm going to go with blue. Maybe add some purple and just drag. First of all, I'm going to add a few more little strokes. Okay, look at that blue. Love this blue. Okay, that's a nice burst. Okay, now I'm just dragging it. You can see I'm not being picky with this, okay? I'm just going in and having fun with it. That's all I could say. Go in and have fun with it. It's going to come out so much better than you think it will, okay? We don't want to go willy-nilly, but you could see now that burst is dragged out. I really feel like when that center burst really pops, it just looks really cool. Okay, I'm glad with that little decision we made. Okay, I am going to show you a close-up of this cup. Okay, let me bring it up to the camera. The bottom is already dry. You could see here. Now with the light, I will say more white areas are showing through. In person, you don't see those white areas as much. That's really kind of like where the oranges and yellows are. But I'll post a picture, like I had promised, in the comment section so that you could see how it really looks. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope everyone's staying safe.